Jeez, that was a fucking shit show. But of course, this all led into the topic of race realism because that was essentially what the server was about. So then we started digging deeper into this, and then I got JF on a few times, and then we started talking about this subject. And now, Destiny, you don't seem none too pleased about this.
Yeah, I guess if we want to hop into that. So my main problem with this kind of stuff is you've got normative claims and you've got descriptive claims, right? So on the descriptive side of things, you describe scientific fact, right? Like the house is blue, right? And then on the normative side of things, you have what we ought to do with the house, right? So let's say the house is blue, so we should destroy it, right? The normative claim that we should destroy it is a claim of what we ought to do with it. And then the descriptive claim is that the house is blue. The problem that I have with people, especially JF, is that it seems like what happens is we get a whole bunch of really toxic normative claims that are built off of descriptive claims. So for instance, there are people that believe that race is real. There is a huge difference in IQ between black people and white people. Therefore, people like Terry McCarthy or the alt-hype will say things like, we need a white ethno-state of the US. We need to get rid of all of the brown people. And then when people challenge these kinds of assertions, these normative assertions, people like JF will show up and they'll defend the descriptive claim without really commenting on the normative. You know, JF will show up and he'll say, oh, well, the science is kind of correct, or, you know, in some ways he's kind of correct that race is real, but then they never like make any kind of comment on the normative side of things. That's my pretty big problem with it. Yeah,
you were saying that the main issue you have is now people are starting to say race is real, therefore, and then the extreme right will start saying things like maybe we should, you know, remove a certain race out of certain areas to, you know, better the society that we're living in. And that's something you obviously have a problem with. And I want to say right now, like, for people who are watching who may be alt-right or whatever, while I believe race is real, I am saying in no way that we should judge someone based on averages, based on what we think their IQ might be. We should treat everyone as an individual, because it's just inhumane, in my opinion, to take an average and then fucking, you know, banish people because of so and so. And I just think that's fucked up, in my opinion.
So I'm kind of curious, just when you say that, just based on your conversations, when you say race is real, can you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah. Well, looking at all the different races, there are a lot of differences within all the races, such as, you know, bone structure, you know, certain races being more intelligent. Sorry, what?
With black people, I mean, they have a higher increased chance of having sickle cell anemia. I mean,
so that's not well, but so even that's not
that's a genetic difference in a race, and
but that's not. I mean, so well, firstly, that's not necessarily true. So the sickle cell anemia. So that particular thing that you're talking about is really only impactful to blacks that lived in the sub-Saharan region. It was like a response developed to malaria. So there are plenty of black people that don't have that innate defense, or I'm sorry, that
right. But as an average, that will show that is a common.
Yeah, sure, but this is the problem, right? Is that I could show you a white person that would have this trait, and I could show you a black person that doesn't have this trait. So what is the usefulness in saying black people have this thing and white people don't?
Well, I think we're talking about averages and the probability. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, I mean, there's always an exception to some sort of rule. I mean, you know, some of those developments are environmental, but they're, you know.
Yeah,
there are genetic differences.
Yeah, so you can find some genetic differences. I guess my only question is, like, what is the value in recognizing this difference, right? Like in a hospital, you would never say like, oh, well, he's black, therefore this. You would do like some sort of sequencing, or you would take a test to find out, you know, what the exact answer is. You would never classify people in this way, right? And then there are differences we have, like, for instance, like blood type. Do you think that people of blood type A should be a different race than people of blood type B, or people AB or people O? Like, would you classify these people as different races? Like, sure, there could be differences, but is there any value in grouping them as entirely different subspecies or races of people?
Well, the answer to whether there is value in grouping people, the answer is quite simple, is if my prediction is better than random following my grouping, then my grouping provides some information. I don't think that Geek Tulu was presenting a case where every black people has sickle cell anemia. He's just saying, if you divide people into the group black people versus white versus Asian, you will end up with the group of black people being more likely to have sickle cell anemia. That's information that can be useful to a doctor, that can be useful to people in general. I mean, some of the examples of the use, because here Stephen started with the question of normative claims. And it's true, I will admit this. I don't often comment on normative claims, but there's a reason for this. It's that my opponents in the race realist debate are so stupid that they try to fight me on the factual ground. They are so bad at what they do that they come on the public space and they start claiming false stuff, such as race does not exist. Now, I'm happy to go on that ground today with Destiny, and I think that's why we're here. So let's dig deep into this. I do believe that there are some things, and Handy seemed to totally reject the use of race in personal choice and discrimination. I do believe that there are instances of correct personal choice that you can do based on race, which is not something that I would personally reproach. I'll give you one example, and I'd like to hear you guys on this. Is it fine for you guys to have racial preferences in your sexual preferences, to have certain races of people that you prefer having sex with?
Yes, I'd say so. Because it's more of a natural thing of who you're attracted to, I guess, right? Like people who have like yellow fever, are down for only Asians. I have a few friends like that. And no one finds that racist. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who'd be like, "Oh my God, you're fetishizing Asians," but it's just they prefer Asians or something, right?
Yeah, I'm a white dude, and fucking I love olive skinned women. Like, period. There's just something about it.
Okay, before we get too far down on this topic, so earlier you said if my grouping is better than random, it can give me some information. So I don't disagree with that. But if your grouping is better than random, that doesn't give you a reason to create a separate race of people. So for instance, if I were to group people based on height, I could probably make some predictions about these people, or by weight even. Actually, that would be a better one. If I group people by BMI, I could make predictions, pretty accurate predictions about the health of said people, especially in regards to things like diabetes or hypertension. But just because I would have a group of people that are above a certain BMI, I wouldn't, by extension of that, say, well, here is a different race of people, right?
No, it's true, and it's not based on the information that we can obtain on certain diseases like sickle cell that we classify races. Races, they were first classified really from observations, from visual observation, and then later, in fact, within the last 2 decades, we've begun having genetic data that seems to confirm that the general group that we characterize as blacks, whites, Asians, they do refer to some genetic reality. And in fact, when we place all the genetic information that we get on humanity into a computer and we ask the computer to separate these groups as best as he can, of course the races come as a natural division that the computer finds quite easily. So somehow the recent data on genetics in human simply confirms the old idea of race that we had. Of course, it's not a 100% clean boundary. Of course there is race mixing. Of course there are people who are white who do have genes that come from black ancestry. That's all fine because we recognize that we have millions of ancestors in the end, and so we're all a mix of genes. But that doesn't mean that the categories are meaningless. In fact, from a genetic standpoint, we can tell with pretty high certainty where your ancestors come from based on your genes today.
Okay, so firstly, the claim that this is something that you have to elaborate on because I don't think even you believe this. You say that genetic information today confirms old ideas of race. So old ideas of race, what do you mean by that? Because there were extreme claims made by phrenologists, for example, in the past that are definitely not confirmed by...
Yeah. So I just mean the instinctive division that we've made of races, the idea that black people differ from Asians, that Asians differs from whites, and that Native Americans, for example, are distinguishable from the three other groups. So that kind of idea. What I mean is that the subdivisions that we've made based on visual characteristics of facial appearance were not completely wrong. We were not beside the track. In fact, genetic information confirms that these divisions exist.
Okay, but even if these divisions do exist, even if you can cluster genes in some way to say that, like, well, this ancestry probably originated here, or this people's ancestors probably originated here, what is the argument for, it seems like that you don't have these clusters of genes that describe important traits that would make them worth classifying as a different race of people? Or do you think that there are traits that exist, that like phenotypes that can be described by gene clusters that are unique to ancestors of people?
Oh, well, I mean, we have some cases of characteristics that are specific to a village or to a given subpopulation, and that for which we have genetic knowledge. One example is a special disorder that affects my people, actually, the French Canadians. We have a genetic disorder that really emerged in Quebec, and we know exactly the line of families. We know pretty much everyone who has that disorder. It's a handful of people. Those are very rare genetic diseases, so they're easily tractable. There are other features that are more complex for which we don't have single genes, and in fact we know that we probably won't ever find single genes because we know that the behavior is too complex. IQ is one of them. So IQ, we can measure it across races, we can make averages across races, and it's pretty established at this point, and I'd like to hear if you disagree. It's pretty established at this point that the black and Asian and white IQ differ on average.
Okay, so firstly, just to speak to your first thing, so you keep going back to these very precise geographical things. I wouldn't disagree on this, but this, you must understand then that this is different than race then, right? That if you talk about small geographical subsets of people, this is a different grouping now that you've moved to, which I would agree with, versus race. We can go back to the sickle cell example, where there are specific African Americans that lived in specific geographic areas that were exposed to malaria that developed this thing. But the grouping here then falls on geographic lines, not on racial lines, right?
Yeah, so what I explained, and I'm currently preparing a video about this. It's true that I've never talked about this on the public space, but I'm currently preparing a collaboration with Marty Buddha. And what I explained in that video is the idea of race realism is not a statement about the number of races there are in humans. In fact, I recognize that we can divide humanity in 5 races or 600 races. It's just that as you progress between dividing it in 5 and dividing it in 600, of course, you're going to observe different phenomena. First, if we divide it in 600, we are all mixed race in some way. If you divide it in 5, then maybe some of us are not mixed race, at least in terms of the majority of our genome not being mixed race. These are arbitrary choice, and I recognize it. The reality of race is not the fact that there are X races. It's the fact that genetics in humans are clustered, and yes, they are clustered at multiple levels, at the very local level and very limited in time, like 100 years ago, and also at the very macro level over hundreds of thousands of years in terms of separated lines of ancestry developing over these hundreds of thousands of years.
Okay, I don't disagree with most of what you've just said, but this is not what most people that talk about race realism say. So when you say, for instance, that whether we divide into 5 or 600 races, that's something that I obviously can agree with you with. Different genetic clusters will lead to different types of phenotypes that can be classified in whatever way that you want to. When you speak to the idea that IQ is something that is incredibly complicated, it's the amalgamation of tons of genes scattered across the genome, that it's very hard to pinpoint, which clusters even contribute massively to intelligence or variance in intelligence. These are things that I would, of course, agree with. But the race realists don't usually make these claims. Usually the claim is we know for a fact where intelligence comes from. We know which genetic clusters can be attributed to intelligence. And we can point to black people or white people and say that white people possess more of these genetic clusters that make them more intelligent. Do you recognize that most race realists would claim that that difference in IQ between black and white people, that is a genetically intrinsic thing, that it's not something that's influenced by anything beyond like intrinsic genetics, the variation?
Well, you've listed a couple of things there, and I disagree with your characterization of what race realists say. For example, what I consider to be one of the best race realist speaker in the entire internet is Alternative Hypothesis. He does not state that we know the genes that underlie intelligence. Now, he does state that the gap in IQ that we observe between black, whites, and Asians is likely to be of genetic origin. Now, that's a different statement from saying that we know the genes and that we know how they affect the IQ through physiology.
If I may just butt in for a second and read some super chats here. So we have Pop TV, $2. Fuck him up, Frenchie. Ragnar Alberhart, $2. Hashtag Kumai, hashtag blood for the blood gods. Simon Scola, $5. I actually liked Destiny when he debated no bullshit and patty politics. However, now he just uses Talmudic tactics and acts completely disingenuous. White Slave, $5. Andy, have JF say this, please, and listen very carefully. I shall only say this once. JF, may you say that?
Listen very carefully. I shall say this only once.
Thank you. Leo, a Rider Storm, 10 New Zealand dollars, whatever it is. My first super chat ever. Thank you very much. I'm gutting that I missed the roasting yesterday. No, you didn't. You did not miss anything. Don't you fucking worry. Could you re-upload it? Nope. It's shamefully. I'm shamefully addicted to drama. It wasn't just drama. It was beyond that. Edwin Boyette, $5. So if JF says, please be kind and thoughtful with normative claims, then your main point is nullified and all you have left is minutia. You know what?
I have no idea what that means.
Well, what that guy was saying is that if JF would go forth to make positive normative claims, that I wouldn't have an issue with JF anymore, is what that guy was claiming.
Okay. Code Guy, $5. Andy Geek, leave the debate to JF and Destiny. You are being shitty moderators. What do we do?
We're trying to massage the conversation. Yeah. Get it going.
Hey, Jesus Christ. Big Fat Brian, $5. BMI is not constant. BMI can be changed. And I'll read the last one here for now. Leo Ridestorm, $5 again. Thank you. I only want to fuck skinny pale nerds. I must be racist against buff tan guys, but seriously, people can't help who they're attracted to. All right,
it's good, girl.
Okay, so responding to JF, what you said about the alt hype, do you not see a problem with the statement that we haven't figured out exactly how genes can influence IQ, and we don't know which loci or whatever, like the heaviest IQ contributing genes are from, but we know it's the genes? That type of descriptive claim doesn't make you uncomfortable?
No, it doesn't make me uncomfortable because I know the scientific tools that allow us to make these claims. The scientific tool that allow us to understand that IQ is highly influenced by genes is twin studies. That's actually one of the tools. Twin studies allow you to determine if something comes from the genes without knowing what the gene is. Do you understand with this statement? Do you agree with this statement?
I would have to look at the specific twin study because it's not necessarily true.
Well, the function of a twin study is always the same. It's to distinguish the environmental effect from the genetic effect. And you typically do that by comparing monozygotic twins who have the exact same genes and dizygotic twins who only share 50% of their genes.
Yeah.
And so if you have two individuals that are literally the same individuals from the genetic perspective, and you raise them either in the same environment or different environment, you have essentially an experiment of nature. You have what happens to the exact same genes in two different conditions. Whereas when you have twins that are dizygotic, what you have are twins that do not have the exact same genes, and so you have an experiment where nature can have an effect on two people who are different at the genetic level. And so this allows you to tease out the difference. It allows you to tease out the effect, the percentage of effect that you could expect from the environment, and the percentage of effect that you can expect on the trait from genetics.
In an ideal circumstance, sure, depending upon your shared and unshared environment, sure, yeah. I mean, I understand that the theory behind like a twin study. I'm just not aware of like the definitive set of twin studies that have ruled that difference in IQ can be explained due to genetics.
Yeah, so these studies repeatedly shown that that IQ is influenced by genetics, and that the percentage of variance in the populations that are studied by these twin studies is from 50% to 80% explained by variance in genes rather than variance in environments.
What is that study, or rather like a collection of them? I'll go look them up after because I'm not familiar with these.
Yeah, well, I can send you a link. The alternative hypothesis actually keeps a list of all of these studies. So,
hey, Destiny, did you say someone? Hang on, someone. David Cedarwood, he threw $2. Thanks. Destiny said that he'd be fucked if alt hype was on a stream. Did you say that?
Probably at one point in time. Yeah, the descriptive is like very, very difficult to discuss here, and I'm just like starting to get into all of it. So.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on this? Because like, I mean, like, do you believe that race is not real?
So, well, my problem is twofold. My problem mainly lies in the normative claims where people like JF or people like alt-hype will go on to say that ethnostates should exist. And these types of normative claims, I think, are really bad. Even if we were to see the entire descriptive claim that there is some difference between races that could be accounted for genetically, even if we assumed that, I think the normative claims are still bad. But I don't think the descriptive claims have been settled at all. Like, yeah, so it's even more damaging at that point.
But do you think that people just not talking about it would be better? Because, like, I mean, I know what you're saying.
Talking about it is good. My first and foremost, my goal of everything is to find more truth, right? When I do research or when I have discussions, is to get closer and closer to the claims that are true. And I think most people should value conversation that way. So I think there's value in discussing it. It's just that there's a difference between like, let me give an example, and then two types of people that could approach this example, okay? Sure. Let's say that I was an intelligence researcher, okay? And let's say that I wanted to create a world where everybody was living together and working in the optimal way, right? Because when civilizations work together, we tend to thrive together. Typically, that's how human history has gone. So I start researching and I find, hey, okay, well, there are intrinsic differences in the way that, phenotypes are presented across populations of people. I'm going to use this understanding in order to help as many people as possible. For a real world example of this, we can use dyslexia, right? Dyslexia, if you had dyslexia a long time ago, it was pretty shitty. You're probably going to be a really shitty reader if you even learn to read or write. Whereas today, if we can identify a child early on with dyslexia, we change the education a little bit and they can read and write just as quickly as any normal person, right? So if I was coming at the research from a compassionate point of view, that would be my goal, okay? I can identify differences in races, that can be attributed to like an entire cluster of people, right? That I can find these and then I can use that information to better all of mankind. The problem is that people like Ryan Falk look for these differences and their ultimate goal is usually to exclude groups of people, that they want to forcibly remove people from populations, so they want to see people separated out from white people, that they want to create like a white ethno-state that only has white people, and they want to try to exclude as many people as possible. And I don't think that path forward is a healthy path for the entire planet. It just doesn't seem to work as well when you've got countries that are fucked and destable and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, for sure. I want people, like I started the stream by saying, like, I'm very against a white ethno state. I think
But people like Ryan Falk, people like Tara McCarthy, people like, I could go on, the Lauren Rose, are tons of people. Lauren Southern, there are tons of people. Everybody that has made this claim, like, we must abandon civic nationalism, like all of the alt hypothesis guy, JF to some extent has been on videos saying things that he would be okay with an ethno state. There are lots of people though that do go forth with that normative claim that an ethno state would be a preferable thing. And then they base this off of extreme descriptive claims like, all of the variance in IQ between black people and white people can be attributed to genetics. Therefore, get all the blackies out of the country so that we can have our pure white ethno state.
But I think
there's lots of straw men in there, and so I'd like to dig in there and also ask you guys back the question, because Stephen has still not answered my question whether it's fair for someone to have sexual preferences for certain races. You two have responded, but not him. But on the question of the ethno-state, I don't know that these people are necessarily saying that we would exclude people violently, which you seem to be suggesting. At least that's not what I've ever proposed. I believe that an ethno-state could be established in a pacific manner. And I will say that on another show, on your show, Andy, we were discussing about the fact that white civilizations have improved the entire world, whether we like it or not. We were discussing this in the case of Rage, and our claim that the white man has actually improved Africa. Africa today wouldn't be as good at it as it is if it wasn't that there was a white civilization in Europe developing and producing technology and producing models of law, models of individual liberty. Don't you guys agree that in the history of mankind, white ethno-states have actually led the path forward for individual liberty, for democracy, for advancement in technologies? Don't you think that there were, like the white ethno-states such as the US as it was founded, or many European countries as they existed within the last few hundred years ago, don't you think that some of the best things that were produced on this planet and that have improved the entire planet come from white ethno-states?
From what I've researched, yes, it's a bit, you know, people would hear that and think it's racist, but it's racist but true. You know what I mean? But where we are now currently, and where we have, like, where our Western civilization is now, I believe that we could obviously all work together. But I understand what you're saying, JF. Yeah. How about you, Destiny? What do you think?
So, okay, so because I'm sorry, I haven't responded to your one question yet because there's still pre-stuff. I don't want to jump into later things about whether or not you can date somebody and have it be racist or not. So for the first thing, and this goes back to my central problem with you. You say, I have not advocated for a violent ethno-state, but I've listened to you talk to Ryan, and you've said that the highest chance of an ethno-state occurring is usually out of like violent circumstances, that it's usually once things have gotten really desperate that these ethno-states will emerge. And you should know, I don't know if you do or not, but you should know that when you implicitly support via your descriptive claims groups of people that do advocate for the violent removal of people, such as like Tara McCarthy or these other more extreme race realists, that even if you yourself aren't in favor of a violent ethno-state, if you're willing to back up all of their descriptive claims and then say, well, yeah, I'm in favor of an ethno-state, that people are going to look at that as like your tacit approval of a violent ethno-state. That could be a realistic way to interpret your point of view.
There are many layers of falsehood here.
Okay.
First, I do not think that Tara McCarthy has advocated for the removal of legal citizens from her state violently. I believe that the only thing that where she advocated violence was against illegal invasions of her country.
Can we, that claim in particular, I have a 2.5-minute video. Can we watch it? It'll take 2.5 minutes.
Sure. And then I'll read super chats in a sec, but go ahead.
Am I able to chat in this in our discussion?
What do you mean?
Like, can I put a message to you guys in this Google Hangout? Is there like a chat somewhere?
Yeah.
The chat to the right.
Okay.
On the top left there. Hey, Geek, do you know how to? Are you able to play that through voice meter?
No, I don't have voice meter set up. I need to actually get on doing.
Can we can all just start it at the same time and then watch it from start to finish? It's 2.5 minutes. It's pretty quick.
Sure, and then I'll describe to everyone what we're listening to here. In fact, I'll put the
yeah. Well, they should be able to hear it.
Okay. No, because this is Hangouts. I'm getting my OBS set up for next week to get this shit. So I'm gonna spam it in the chat here. So everyone, there you go. Spammed in the chat. Click that link. We're gonna watch that right now.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Jesus Christ. Hit the link, guys.
And now you move on to
Hit-
babies whose parents came into the country and had them in the hospital in the US, and then they became US citizens by default. And people who were born in the country of legally resident or legal citizens in the US, for example. So I believe that we should revoke the baby citizen status because it was required through multiple means. We know that the elders were gay, and thus they are illegal, so we should deport them.
Jesus.
As for naturalized citizens, it may be possible to revoke the naturalized citizenship in some cases. As for people who are citizens who were born of citizens in the United States, I believe we need to incentivize them.
See,
All right. So first thing to everyone. Yeah.
hold on.
Sorry. I'm getting oh, sorry.
Okay,
I'm getting voice meter set up next week. We have an OBS new setup that we're going to do so we can actually play the video. So I sent the link there. I'll put it for anyone who's interested watching this post it being live. I'm going to put the link on the bottom of the description bar. But that was Tara McCarthy. Destiny, do you want to just give everyone a quick rundown of what we just watched?
So here's the quotes, and I'll focus on the first one since this is what I'm sure JF is going to anchor his entire defense of this on. But she begins in the beginning by saying, "We absolutely have a right to deport all legal residents by any means necessary, including threatening/killing them." Now, I'm going to guess that JF, are you going to say that, well, she's talking about illegal residents, so that makes it okay? Is that what your response would be to that?
No, I'm saying that she is entirely correct. Yeah, she is correct. You have the right to remove through physical force someone who invades your country. She is absolutely correct. In fact, hashtag Tara said nothing wrong.
Sure. So by quote unquote invade your country, she is talking about people that are naturalized citizens and people that are actual citizens, people that have visas, all of these types of people she would consider invaders. So let's say you have two parents who are American citizens and you're born to them and you're now an American citizen, but you happen to be Hispanic. JF believes that Tara is right in saying that they should be forcibly removed from the country. That is your claim?
No, I think that you missed our caveat at the end, which is that if the invaders are legal citizen, that they acquired citizenship legally, and she really distinguished between legally and illegally. She said illegally, they should be kicked out. Now she said legally, we will have to try to encourage them naturally to leave the country. In other words, she's appealing to our libertarian principle on that question, and she's saying we're going to have to convince them that they should leave, but we will not be able to force them to leave.
So I don't know how she ended that because it stopped in the middle of that sentence. I could bet she would go on to violence, but I can't deductively say that. But what about in the sentence before where she says that people who are naturalized citizens, that their citizenship can be revoked?
Yeah, so she was talking about a specific subset of natural citizens who have been, in her view, naturalized illegally. Now, she was talking specifically about what? Yeah, in her view, the anchor babies are being naturalized illegally, and she has actually a good legal foundation to claim this. Anchor baby is when you come into a country, you quickly make a baby in the hope that this baby will allow you to get natural citizenship quicker because of immigration laws that are more understanding for parents, and especially for parents of a child who is born in the country. So in our view, it is an illegal act to make a baby knowingly for the purpose of getting citizenship in a country. It's an act of invasion, and in our view, it should be called out for the illegality of it, and it should be considered an illegal act. In fact, technically, it is an illegal act if you plan it in a criminal fashion. But in practice, it is very often the case that these acts cannot be prosecuted simply because you cannot have evidence of intent very often.
May I just butt in for 1 second? I just want to tell the audience, I've decided that I'm going to read super chats at the end of the show so I don't interrupt these two in their thought process. And secondly, so sorry about that, but I will stick around for a half an hour after the show's done to hang out, read the chat and stuff. And so just going to do that so I don't interrupt too often. As well, Tara McCarthy is watching in the in the chat right now. Tara wants to come in and swing on by. Would you guys be all right with that? Because I think if we're going to be talking about her point of view, it might be better just to have her in. What do you guys think?
I think JF can probably defend her point of view better than she can. She's not very intelligent. I think JF would do a better job.
Oh, yo, internet blood sports. Who's down?
So speaking very clearly to what you just said, JF. So
hey, Tara, follow me. By the way, follow me. I'll follow you back, and I'll send you the link.
So JF, your defense of her saying that we should deport illegal residents is that it's up to her to define what illegal is, because she clearly separated the category of naturalized citizens via the anchor baby stuff, which is something that you can say you want it to be illegal, but it's not illegal. It's part of the immigration policy of the United States right now, whether you like that or not. And then secondly, she differentiated and said people that were naturalized through other means, she would have them deported forcibly as well, because she considers them to be here, quote unquote, illegally, where that word illegal doesn't mean legal by legal definition, but legal by whatever her personal moral law or whatever is in regards to these issues.
I think you missed the end of that statement. The end of that statement is that she distinguishes between two kinds of naturalized citizens. One of them has obtained their status illegally, and she says they should be deported based on the fact that they have committed illegal actions. The other portion, which became citizens legally, through legal means, she says we would just have to encourage them to leave, but we couldn't force them. Well, she's not suggesting.
Why would she make a video saying that people that are here illegally need to be punished under the law? That's not the purpose of this video, and that's not what she said. She specifically said people that were naturalized through other means. If they're naturalized through a legal process, they're a legal citizen. How could you tell them that they have to leave without using some sort of extra legal procedure or having her own arbitrary definition of what is legal or illegal?
Yeah, I think you're just confused there. She's just appealing to their willingness to leave the country.
Oh, Jeff, didn't she say in that video that that we should give financial incentive for people who are legally born here to leave?
At the very, very end, that was for her last group of people.
Yeah. Okay,
but the thing is, if there is a group of people or a certain group of people that are in your country illegally, so is your stance that we should say, hey, would you please leave? And they say no, and we go, no, all right, and just leave it at that? No, we have to enforce laws that we've created to keep our society functioning the way that
sure. So these are weasel words. No one is talking about not enforcing a law. Nobody is talking about letting illegal stay. She's very specifically talking about people that are in the country that are of the wrong race that she feels shouldn't be here. That's why she's talking about.
Hi, I'm actually here if you want to hear my opinion.
I don't think she's talking about race. I think she's talking about illegal citizenship.
Would you like me to state my opinion, or do you want to keep stating it for me?
I'd rather state what's in the video than hear you weasel out of it.
Okay, that's a 2-minute video from 2 years ago. So, I stand by deporting illegals, and that is done.
Everybody does. Nobody cares. Move on to the interesting part.
That is done. I just want to clarify that when I say at the point of a gun, that is basically meaning what ICE does already. So that's nothing new. But yeah, I want to do things in the most amicable way possible. And actually, the primary way that I want to do things is through incentives, through basically paying people to leave. And
so what do you do if you have, let's say you get 2 Hispanic people, they come from the country of Mexico, they come to the United States legally, they get naturalized, and then they have a child, and that child says, I don't want to leave, even though they're really, really, really brown. How do you get that child out of the country if they won't accept a financial incentive to leave?
To me, that's not an issue. I just want to reverse the trends. So if there are some people who really want to stay, it's not a huge problem to me. It's more like, which way are we going? Are we maintaining the main group of the country, or are we actually working with policies to get rid of the main group?
So what groups of people are you focused on getting rid of and keeping?
I want the primary ethnic group of the country.
What is the primary ethnic group? What do you mean by that, ethnic?
Well, in America, it's whites.
White people. White is not an ethnicity, dude. Do you mean Scottish people? Do you mean British
Well, at
people?
this
Do you mean
point, Destiny, I think you're
Anglo-Saxons?
being
Like,
dishonest. I
what
think
do you
we
mean am I
all
being
understand what
dishonest?
she means. She means Caucasians who form the majority of the United States. That's
Okay,
what
so so somebody like me whose background is 50% Cuban, am I white enough to stay in the ethno state, even though half of my background is Cuban? Or what about somebody like Nicholas Fuentes, who is half or a quarter Hispanic or whatever? Are these people white enough for the ethno state?
Well, if you ask most people who are involved in what I'm doing, people like Greg Johnson, who has various different articles about this on his website, you know, there are degrees of difference. And the people who are most different to us, for example, sub-Saharan Africans who have literally just flown over 1 generation ago, would be first priority to encourage them to move back to their ancestral homeland. And it would go like that.
Okay, so what is the ultimate goal? Like, what is the ultimate group of white people that you want to keep? Like, what is that group of white people? They're just people that look white, or?
Well, as I've said elsewhere, I'm not working towards a specific, like, oh, things are going to be like a utopia when we have X percentage white people in the country. That's not what I'm doing. I'm simply trying to reverse current trends, which are going to lead to an obliteration of all Western countries if they continue.
You mean an obliteration of white people as the majority demographic?
Iter, may I ask you something?
Sure, go ahead.
Why do you want only white people here? Like what's the reason? Like what's your points?
But I just want to point, you guys keep strawmanning her. She didn't say only white people here.
Yeah.
She said a majority of whites. So why don't you address her on the point that
okay, sure.
It's very frustrating.
It is, Jeff. I agree.
Okay. Sorry. So who do you want primarily to leave? Because what I just heard you say, and this is all right. Calm down. I'm hearing is that you want mainly Caucasians here, right? So why do you want that? What's your points, and why do you want that?
Well, number one, if you look at the founding fathers and what they wrote, the United States of America was founded by white people, for white people.
That's not true. You're lying.
Yes, it is, and their posterity.
Where did they write that? That's not true.
Okay, you obviously don't have knowledge on this topic.
Yeah.
I have way more knowledge than you. I promise I do.
No, you don't. If you're not aware of this, then
I'm very much aware of this, okay? Firstly, that posterity is never defined as white people. Secondly, your current working definition of white people would not have matched any definition of white people that the founding fathers would have had. It would have been Anglo-Saxons. And you can find specific quotes by people like Benjamin Franklin that will describe people that you consider today as white as swarthy, which was their way of saying dark-skinned or brownish, right?
Okay, you're really nitpicking here.
Nitpicking?
It clearly says free white men in the Constitution originally. So anyway, Alternative Hypothesis has an entire video on this.
Can you explain quotes from the founding fathers that specifically describe like Spaniards and Germans as swarthy then? Can you tell me why they would explain them in that way?
I believe it was actually in the 1920s they decided on their definition of white, and they decided that Asian Indians were not included. And
what does the 1920s have to do with the founding fathers, Tara?
Well, this is the history of the U.S. and it's.
I know, and it seems like you don't know it very well. So I'm asking you, where in the initial founding fathers did they have a definition of white people that includes all people that look white, and this is who the country should be for, when like 90% of them were Anglo-Saxons, not just generalized white people like you view them today?
But Destiny, it seems that the point you're making right now is that they were poorer than Tara's own definition of today's ethnicity, of today's United States major ethnicity. Tara started by stating that America was founded by white people. Do you agree?
No. Because the definition of white people is important here. Tara doesn't recognize, ironically enough, because of multiculturalism, Tara doesn't recognize that her working definition of white person is going to be dramatically different than the definition of a white person in the 1700s.
You're the only one autistic enough to not understand that Tara's definition does not matter here. Do you agree that the founding fathers of America had a skin that was white, and that if they were to go to the grocery store today, someone would say, hey, here's a white person?
Sorry, your mic is a little bit roboting right now. Do you want to just like try turning your mic off and on? That usually works. Sorry.
My question here is granted, yes, our founding fathers were white. They were white. But the Constitution was designed, for for all people to be created equal. It didn't say specifically
No,
one
that's
race.
not what they're referring to in that point. When they say all people created equal in the Declaration of Independence, they're actually talking about there is no right to kinghood, basically. That's why they're writing that to the British king so that they can start their own state. That it's they're not talking about all people being equal. Obviously, they didn't believe that they had slaves, you know.
Don't you think that civilization has evolves and changes throughout, you know, the years, and people get smarter and technology evolves and civilizations evolve? Therefore, like, if we're going to look at the past and go with the past, then we still have, you know, a lot of fucked up laws, a lot of fucked up things happening. Women wouldn't have the right to vote.
But it would be a complete fallacy to say just because something is an older practice that it's therefore wrong. I think you'd agree with that. I mean, yes, there have been some messed up things in the past, but yes, there have been also lots of things that actually work in the past. And I happen to believe that one of those things that works is having ethno-states, which is the norm for all of history. Multiculturalism is a modern experiment that's been happening since the 1960s onwards. And from what I see, it creates far, far more problems than it does benefits.
Well, wasn't ancient Rome a multicultural society?
Yeah, I think that's the reason it fell.
No, I think
this is a lost argument. Yeah, no, this is a lost cause. Do you consider white people, or do you consider Jewish people white people? I'm just curious.
Well, from my interaction with Jewish people, it seems that they don't consider themselves white, so I think it would be unreasonable to consider them white. Okay, so if they consider themselves white, you would consider them white? What about a Hispanic that considered himself white? Would you consider them white because that's what they consider themselves as? You dodged that question magnificently, by the way. Actually, some of my friends who actually support this are partly Hispanic and could technically, you know, be classed as Hispanic, but because they, you know, they marry white people, they look white, they act white, they are pro in-group preference for whites, I have zero problem with them being here. Okay, so let me ask this one more time. Let's see if I can get yes or no. Let's say you have a group of 100 Jewish people and they actually consider themselves white. Do you consider them white then? White enough for your ethno-state? I wouldn't have a problem with these people so long as they are not practicing in-group preference for their own group. It's when they would consider themselves white, so they would be for the whole white group. Yeah, if they're in-group preference for whites and they look white, act white, etc., that's fine by me. What if you had like the milkiest of milky brown person that would consider himself to be somewhat white? Do you think this person passes for your white ethno-state as long as they advocate for the white cause? Yeah. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So it sounds like you're accepting of multiculturalism as long as the person like this. Now it sounds like we're getting into like civic nationalism, right? Where if that person, no, that's oh for goodness sake, Destiny, I can't believe you. Can you actually think straight? Like, or are you just destined to strawman me forever? Well, you're telling me that black people, you're telling me that black people that have milky skin and Jewish people can identify as white people, and now you're asking me, are you serious? About people. Well, if they have white skin. It's likely that they have. To me, that Tara
has been maintaining a radically consistent view from the beginning of that interview. She said at the beginning, our priority should be to exclude full-blooded sub-Saharan Africans who came here from one generation. I mean, it seems that this girl understands what she's talking about.
For sure. But that's not the majority of people that they're talking about deporting from the United States, JF. They're not talking about fighting all of the 100% pure-blooded sub-Saharan Africans and rounding up the 100 of those that exist in the U.S. They want to take it much farther than that and talk about the Hispanic people that are living here, the black people that are living here, and then incentivize them to leave as well. They're not talking about only sub-Saharan Africans.
Is working at reversing a current trend in immigration, just like she stated right at the beginning. That's what she's interested in. And then you're pinpointing on special example and trying to catch her on the details.
I'm not trying to catch on it either. I'm just curious what her working definition.
There will be ethnic diversity in the white ethno-state.
Okay, Destiny. So let me explain what I'm doing. You are welcome. It's okay, because you're a little slow and I understand you're having trouble following along. So she said that she wants to keep the country a primary demographic by discouraging people that don't fit within that demographic from coming here. She wants to, as you said, reverse trends, right? So what I'm curious is, what is her working definition of white? Because I'm curious what trend she's trying to reverse. That's why I'm asking questions. Do you consider this person white? Do you consider this person white? So that we can get on the same page about the working definition of white person that she's using. Because up until this point, because to her own benefit, she tries to keep that ambiguous so that people can attack her position. And you're, of course, jumping to her defense because you want her to keep it ambiguous as well and only look at like the most extreme examples that everybody can kind of agree with. I'm trying to establish what our actual
definitely. Let me
just hop in for 1 second. Sorry, I'm just gonna tell people in the chat we'll do 5 more minutes with Tara, and then we'll get back to JF versus Destiny. And people are asking, why did you let Tara in here? It's because we were talking about here, and this is an open house for people to have fucking discussions about whatever, no matter what their beliefs are. I believe in free speech. That's why she's in here, and she has the right to speak. And I don't think us talking about her point of view with her not in here is fair. So yeah, we'll do 5 more minutes of this, and then we'll move on. But go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, so most people who I know in this community, now you do get really crazy radical people who I'm actually not one to associate myself with, but most people who I personally associate myself with, and my personal view, but the reason why we're ethno-nationalists is because we actually don't believe that most people from certain groups, such as sub-Saharan Africa, where the average IQ is 70, and there are many other differences as well, it's not just IQ, we don't believe that they can fully ever assimilate into our countries, into our cultures, into our societies. And this is just well demonstrated. Look out the window and you can see it for yourself.
That's not an argument. You know, that look out the window, that appeal to anecdote is an incredibly stupid argument.
Ton of statistics.
Okay, what about the statistics that people that come from Africa to the United States are some of the most highly educated people here? That if you look at the average incomes, the average educational attainment of people that come to the United States from countries like Nigeria usually far outpaces even European immigrants. I mean, what data do you want me to look at, Tara?
Yeah, they are an exception, and they're obviously, when they come over as students, that makes sense. But the vast majority, as we see them flooding into Europe right now, of sub-Saharan Africans, these are highly violent people. These are very low IQ people. They are not capable of functioning in our society.
Okay. Look at,
look at
how you set that up. Look at how you set that up, Tara. The people that come to the United States that come from Africa, well, these are people that are highly educated. You're pointing to my flaw in selection bias, which I agree with you there.
I'm not talking about education. I'm talking about
I'm trying to help you.
Who come in on scholarships and things like that. It's like they are the elite of the elite.
No, that's exactly what I was just saying.
Hey, Tara, may I ask you a question?
No, wait, because I want to finish this. Because there's a big problem. She acknowledges that there's a bias in the selection of the group coming to the United States because these are the best and brightest, right? These are the best and brightest. So of course, Stephen, those people are going to be doing better. But then when you look at Europe and you go, well, look at all of these illegal immigrants. Do you think middle-class people from sub-Saharan Africa or upper-class people are the ones illegally immigrating? No, of course not. You're applying a similar selection there where you're selecting for the lowest and most desperate people there as well. Why don't you acknowledge that?
If you take an average sample of sub-Saharan Africans, their average IQ is 70. Period.
Yeah, of course. But what does this have to do with any of the arguments that we've been making? If I take an average sample of IQ of people from a small dumb fuck town in Alabama or some shit, it's probably going to be very low compared to...
Destiny, this is what I wanted to ask her was, okay. So
also, nice dodge on that question. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Okay, you know how... So basically, Tara, like you want mainly white people here primarily because what, IQ, they function better in society? Is that why?
Yeah, well, it is really quite a deep question. You know, I don't feel I can quickly go over this, unfortunately.
Well, no, it's fine. But my question is
the answer is because brown people are scary, Andy.
Can you please stop, Destiny? You are so immature. I can't believe it.
Hang on. So it is internet blood sports from time to time. So
Andy, could you turn up the contrast or turn up the brightness on your camera because you're looking a little scary right now. I don't know if you got a lot of Italian in or what, but holy shit, man, I'm getting a little nervous in here.
I'm Portuguese. But okay. I want to bring up one thing, Tara. Like, if we're going to be deporting people who can't function in society, should we deport white people who have low IQs and cause a crime as well?
Well,
because they're not functioning in society as well.
The idea is I am pro-eugenics, pro-voluntary eugenics, pro-voluntary eugenic policies. So that's the idea of how to deal with the less functional members of our own group. Of course, we have problems within our group. The problem is we bring in far more problems when we import them from other nations. And, you know, for 10,000, or, you know, it depends on your story of evolution, but for tens of thousands of years, we've been functioning as a group, you know, as Europeans. And we have different places, different classes, different roles in society. And it's kind of worked, generally speaking. The problem occurs when you start bringing in all sorts of other groups that have different interests, different in-group interests. They are competing with the main group, and they are working to the detriment of the main group, which is us Europeans. And I'm just saying it's just not in our best interest, and we shouldn't do it.
I have a real quick question. I don't know a whole lot about you, Tara. I heard your name. Are you an American citizen?
Why are you asking that question?
Well, I mean, you're speaking for my country, so I was just kind of curious. Like, are you in my country, and do you see these things? I'm trying to figure out, you know, why you have a perspective about American, you know, immigration. I'm just curious. I just wanted to know.
Sure. So personally, I consider myself to have a genetic interest.
Well, but you're dodging my question. I'm asking you, are you an American citizen?
I'm marrying an American, and my kids are American citizens.
You're kind of like, you're getting naturalized here? You're the exact kind of person that we would want to kick out.
That's not even worth an answer.
It's true. You're a foreign invader coming to my country, marrying somebody to illegally invade my land to procure citizenship. This is disgusting.
Hey, Tara, like, honestly, I could see, like, your point of view. I don't agree with it. However, I see what you're saying, but Destiny and Geek Cthulhu just made a fucking massive point right now. Massive point.
What is their point?
The point is, she wants people who aren't American citizens to leave, yet she is not American herself and is marrying American citizen.
She never mentioned that she's totally against immigration. She says that immigration should take into account the possibility of these people adapting to our society in a way that is positive for both the society and for themselves.
That's
Do you
not
think
true.
that she qualifies as one of the immigrants?
It's based on race, JF.
Answer that question. Do you think that Tara is one of the people who could qualify under her definition as someone who would oppose or who would have a negative effect on American societies? I don't think so. At least not by our definition, and in fact not by mine. And so she would be a positive addition to any society.
Thank you, JF. Well, you know, to me, it doesn't really matter. You know, I may not even live in the US. We might move to Europe. It's not really a huge deal to me. I personally speak on American politics because everyone's interested in it. Frankly, as an American, perhaps you don't understand, but America is a world superpower, and it's pretty much the leader of Western civilization. So we all I think all white people have an interest in the well-being of America. And in addition to that, there are so many European countries. Of course, I do tend to talk about news events in those countries and policies. But overall, the points I'm making on American policy can be applied across the board. They can be applied in Australia, they can be applied in the UK, they can be applied in Ireland. So to me, it's almost like I just use the US as just an example. And because most of the people listening are Americans, it makes sense.
I agree.
What she just said is very untrue. Hold on. You cannot compare immigration to the United States to countries in Europe. It works very differently because of the oceans that surround us. So that's not necessarily true. For instance, as she herself pointed out, Africans or Chinese people that immigrate to the United States are being selected for based on
No, they're not. You have diversity lottery. The general principles are the same. I feel.
Wait. I'm sorry. Do you agree or disagree with what you said earlier? That most of the Africans coming here are coming from the most educated backgrounds?
No, I'm talking about a specific group of Africans that you're talking about, the intelligent ones.
Not a specific, any African that come. If I select for people coming from Africa to the United States, there's a decent chance that these people are going to be very educated. Just because the only people from Africa that can get to
what proportion of Africans happen to be intelligent when they're coming to the US.
So do you think unintelligent Africans are just making the swim, or what? How do you think they get here?
Well, they can just fly in on a tourist visa and just stay. It's not that complicated.
Honey, oh my God. Do you think the average like broke as fuck person just buys an international flight and comes to the United States and just lands here?
Well, if you've been to New York recently, you might notice that most of the people selling hats and things on the side of a road are illegal Africans. So
well, I used to
There's a
live in New
huge
York
population
myself.
of illegal Africans in the United States. Do you have like a news story or something I can look at that's not from the Daily Caller or Breitbart? I'd be very interested to hear about all of these.
well, I
incredibly
bump into
destitute
them in New
I don't
York
care
on
who
a
you bumped
semi-regular
into, dude.
basis. So
Your
Yeah,
anecdotes.
yeah, and Destiny, let her respond. Let her respond. Let her respond.
Okay, I don't care about the personal story. Like, oh well, I ran into one time. Like, what does that mean? That means nothing.
I see them every single time I walk
I
down
don't
the
care
street
what
there,
you see,
on
dude.
the side of a street. Anyway, look,
Do you see
this
them
is
in New
really
York as
nitpicking
well?
and irrelevant. You know, you're not talking about the real issue, which is should European people of European descent who have created countries, whose ancestors have built countries, should they be giving these countries away to people who actually despise them in many cases?
Sure. So here's the real issue. The real issue is we all share this planet. We're more connected than we ever have been. It's in everybody's best interest to make sure that everybody is working together and functioning as well as possible. That's the real issue. This fantasy that, and I take issue with this. My ancestors built fucking Europe. What the fuck did you do personally? You haven't contributed to the construction of your country or the creation of a government or the revolution to establish a new anything. Okay.
As
So
I'm
just because
sure
you're
JF can explain to you, genetic propensity to certain actions is, you know, it's literally in your blood. Like what your ancestors have done, you are more capable of being able to do yourself.
Oh wait,
or
hang
your
on.
children are more capable.
Hey, Tara, sorry for interrupting, but then that means then black people who say you made us slaves, then we should take that into account as well. We should be, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, I was a slave owner because your ancestor was a slave and my ancestors owned slaves.
To my knowledge, only about 1% of white Americans own slaves, so it's not a huge deal.
Still though, what you're
she's
doing,
correct. She's correct.
Yeah.
It's probably not a genetic characteristics of
Yeah, but
white
that's
people.
not- that's
to
not
like
a-
owning
but
slaves.
yeah,
Well, that was so bullshit. The phenotype
as-
of owning slave could probably only exist in a society where that phenotype is supported by phenotypes of other people around them that would agree with that idea. That's total bullshit, Jeff, and you know that's bullshit. If there was a phenotype for a slave owner, that phenotype could not manifest itself in a society unless the other people around it tacitly agreed with it. Unless that single phenotype was able.
Hasn't most of societies and races
around you
enslaved
don't
other
stop
races
you
throughout
from
history?
doing something. It's not because people around you don't stop you from doing something that they have a genetic propensity to like that thing or to support it tacitly, as you say. There is not necessarily a moral duty for people to revolt against slavery in a society where slavery is just being tolerated because it's being enacted by the most powerful people in that society who can afford slaves. That's very different. And as far as the genetic statement of Tara goes and how it relates to that statement, I fully stand by her statement.
So when we have the Civil War, why weren't the 1% of slave owners just thrown out? And then people are like, oh, well, fuck, we don't want to go to war. Like, you just take, because not all of us are slave owners. It's very, very few people. Just take the slave owners and we'll be at peace. Why would the entire South go to war?
If you
then?
really think that whites have some kind of genetic propensity to slave ownership, you should have a problem with Africans because they're selling slaves right now.
I never said it. You're the one that's talking
Absolutely.
about how we have a genetic propensity to form stable governments.
Well,
which I'm
Okay,
pretty sure
well, you're just
everyone-
being
Guys,
ridiculous.
Well, okay. I think we should probably move on from this.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
Honestly, yeah, no worries, Tara. Thank you for being on. I appreciate that. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon, maybe in the future, if we're ever on a discussion about this. It'd be interesting to have you. Yeah, because even though I disagree with you, it's still interesting to hear the other point of view. So thanks for being on.
ways that we could export every brown person from the country.
Hey, but Destiny, but isn't
Keeps
it?
traveling as she leaves. Destiny, this is simply classless. Seriously.
I know.
I would just like to say, just before I leave, actually, please can everyone not listen to what Destiny says I say, because it's not true. And I personally, you know, this is actually a problem for me, people spreading rumors about what I'm saying. I'd rather you just come and listen to what I have to say, you know, take it from my own mouth, and feel free to ask me questions anytime on Twitter or whatever. I'll answer you.
Fair enough.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. I hope that Twitter video or whatever was posted in chat. I think that she speaks pretty well. I think it's not very hard to divine like her intent from her words. Although people like JF will always be here to twist them in whatever way he sees fit. But
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call 1 minute of silence, because in this whole interview, I learned something that really teared my heart apart.
What's that?
Tara McCarthy is getting married with someone else. It's hard. It's very hard.
so, Andy,
Or your
I'm
dick
just curious-
or the situation?
Andy, I'm just curious in looking at you and listening to. Were you able to listen to the entire video?
Yes, yes.
Right. So it's pretty obvious what she's getting at, right? That she wants to deport as many brown people as possible to keep like kind of a white.
No. Destiny, we started with a whole strawman here. She came here, explained her view, and now you're going back to the strawman after she left. That's fucking ridiculous. Let's have a discussion about the morality of using race as a construct for individual decision and political decision, and stop strawmanning Tara. We just spent 30 minutes trying to solve your strawman there.
Okay, so Andy,
I mean, after watching that video and hearing what I heard in the video, now that I have greater context to what she actually believes, like the things in that video aren't as